Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our weekly Learn in Your Lunchtime webinar. My name is Peter Alkema, the Student Success Coach, and it's a real pleasure to spend some time with you every week. We either interview great people that you can learn from, or I coach you on various topics and tips and techniques, all with the intention of helping you to be successful in your studies and on into your career as you prepare for the workplace and make sure that you take what you've learned in your studies and apply that to get the best possible job and be successful in your chosen career and your vocation. So today's topic is on thesis writing, and really what we'll be going through is the major sections of your thesis or final report or postgraduate dissertation. And very often, even at a graduate level, you'll be required to do research and turn in reports about the research work that you've done. And you'll follow the same pattern. Really, the structure of writing up a report about research is always going to be fairly similar. There may be certain requirements from different faculties, but what you learn today, you'll be able to apply in any faculty and at any level. It's just a case of what you might add on to that or make more specific to your research or your faculty, etc. And it's also independent of the methodology you've chosen, the size and the nature of your study, etc. But as always, we'll be taking questions, so please do say hi in the chat. Let us know where you are watching from today and any specific questions. So it's always a lot easier to handle very specific questions, and it can be on thesis writing specifically that we're talking about today, or general topics with regards to student success, and I'll aim to help you as I always do. And of course, if you're not aware, in our Student Success Coach Facebook group, we have been running a laptop giveaway. It's the second one we've done in our community. We did the first one a few months ago, and we actually gave away 3 laptops. And this time we've got another one up for grabs. And really, the rules are quite simple. There's a post in the Facebook group, and you just have to comment on that post and give a motivation as to why you're worthy of getting a laptop. And Tracy Ashington is busy looking at all of those entries. And really, the most important rule is the one with the most reactions is going to, the 3 with the most reactions we'll take as the finalists. And then Tracy Ashington will make a decision based on those 3. So if you're not in that process yet, please do pop in. And of course, please comment and like and react to the other comments. Very important that everybody plays their role to vote and give us a sense of who they think is the most deserving of the laptop. All right, so please just do say hi in the chat. Hope everybody can see and hear me all good. And we're going to get into today's topic. So before we just dive in, I thought I'd just share with you just some comments that I've had, just a bit of social proof, if you like, about the course that I've created on writing your thesis or your final report. So you can see here some comments that students have been through the course and provided on the course landing page. And if you do any of my courses or look at any of my content, I'd really ask that you also give feedback, whether it's a comment or a like or a note, or you share it to somebody. That just really helps make everything that I do a lot more sustainable. So let's have a look there. And I looked at the course this morning. So these are really recent there at the top, a week ago. Course was ice-breaking, taught me every important section. Yeah, so really that's what you get in the course in a lot more detail, and what I'll give you high level of in this webinar, each section, what should go into it. Pelin says, struggling to finish my PhD, wish I'd found the course before. Now, I have since added a couple of additional lessons into the course, one of which helps you in the sort of final months of planning, the completion of the document. So in addition to understanding what needs to go into each of those sections, it's also just a lot of work and a lot of writing to get through everything that you need to in order to then submit and get it off to in the case of a PhD, it would be external examiners, but if it's undergraduate, supervisors and more internal examiners. So that process of getting that work done, I also coach you on in the course as well. And I share what I did in my own PhD and just some of the tips and tricks. And in the course, I give you my PhD, I give you my examiner's comments. We'll have a look at the course just now and see exactly what is in there. Teresa says, I'm getting a broader picture of what is required, gaining more confidence. Absolutely. So that's what I want for you all, is just more confidence, more a sense of enjoyment and fulfillment from your studies. It should not be something that sort of really drags you down and that you find quite difficult to complete. You want to be in a position where you're doing this because you're enjoying it. You've got some big problems that you want to solve in the world, and you believe that applying the rigorous academic process of research is going to provide some contribution. Semin, as always, a very faithful and loyal member of our community. He says, lovely to be here for a Friday lunch session. Looking forward to receiving great insights topic as expected from your webinar. So no pressure there, Semin, but thank you very much. Hopefully you do get some value today. And then let's have a look. Romeo, really demotivated to continue with masters at UJ, but after this course, definitely going for it. Well, that means that, there's some value to the work that I do. I want as many in our community to get through their studies and stick it out and get their degrees. We need graduates in the world today to solve the big problems. We need people to establish themselves in the workplace and start earning an income and start becoming economically active. That's all going to help build a better country and a better South Africa for all of us. So my contribution is to help get people through their studies. You get to that stage of passing and getting out into the world of work. And of course, a lot of my other content deals with the workplace, where I've spent the last 25 years. So there's plenty of additional value that I can help you with a range of different careers. And as you'll have seen on the first slide today, a bonus from today's session is actually going to be access into a cloud online course. So you can learn about cloud and how that's an important part of digital transformation. And I'm fairly certain that any company that you go and work for today is going to be grappling with things like cloud and digital transformation. So we've got a brand new hour-long course. It'd be fairly quick for you just to go through and just get executive insights from somebody who deals with clients and supports people with regards to the cloud. So that's just one example of some of the additional workplace and careers type of courses and training that I can give you. Okay, Dubey, hope blessed afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Just that last comment there on the screen, much needed, highly valuable resource for those pursuing a final submission for any type of postgraduate program or writing project. Absolutely. So as Ramos says there, any research writing project that's going to be useful. So we balance the theory and the practicality, supported by the fact that he speaks from hard-earned experience. Absolutely. So glad to have come across this course as I enter the final stretch towards my master's, the thesis submission. Okay, fantastic. That's a great comment there, and I think it really encapsulates the course. Now, absolutely, what I teach you today and in the course is going to be very useful if you're in that last stage. But equally, what I'd like to do is, as early on in your research as possible, for you to start thinking about that final report and to start understanding what goes in it, and then work towards that all the way through your research degree. Literally, the week that my research proposal was finished, I actually started working on my final report. Now, it may sound strange, but just visualizing and starting to work towards a deadline, even if it's a few years in the future, it gives you something that you can then do a little bit of work on every day, every week, every month as you lead up to that. You do not want to leave a large-scale writing project too late. It's just going to build stress. And the later you leave it, the worse, the procrastination and mental health issues that you're likely to encounter. So absolutely useful at the later stage, but my advice to students is really to get this knowledge and go through this training as early on in your studies as possible. All right, so then, as I said, my name is Student Success Coach Peter Alkema. You can see the website up at the top there, studentsuccess.coach, and I just need to pop a couple of links into the chat before we go ahead. So please also do subscribe. You'll see there's coaching on the YouTube channel, which is where you are now. And the same link that you are watching today, you can pick up the recording as well. And then there's a mailing list so that you can get updates on new courses and promotions, etc. And then the website is here as well. So I'll just pass that through to you. And then very importantly, I did mention the laptop giveaway in our Facebook group. So we've got easily more than 3,000 people in the group at the moment. And what's fantastic is it's not just about me. We've got mentors, we've got people like Tracy, we've got all the guests that we've had in our webinars contributing into that group. And I'm sure that, people interact and support each other. It is a closed private group, so I do moderate it, but it's a safe space. And people really see it as a rich resource of content and support to help you be successful in your studies. Okay, and then Kay says, glad to be attending because I think I'll gain knowledge on how to construct my research protocol. Okay, good point. Now, it's called different things, but whatever you want to call it, it's a large-scale writing project, and it's focused on graduate or postgraduate research, and the pattern or the structure that I teach you today is going to be useful at whatever stage you're in, at whatever faculty you're in, and whatever research problem you're trying to tackle. So yes, I certainly hope that we will meet your expectations there. And I think 1G is here. Good day, everyone. Thanks, Peter. Lovely to receive such information. Looking forward to the session. Okay, great to have you all with us. Fantastic. Let's get started. And just a reminder, please do pop questions in the chat so that I can answer them more specifically. And then Mashiti says, a mind-stimulating site. Okay, well, I don't know. I presume you're referring to studentsuccess.coach. Thank you very much. Yes, there's a blog on there. There's courses on there. There's links to the podcast, to the community, to all bunch of resources that you might find useful. Right. Started. Okay. So it's going to be fairly straightforward in the session. And in your final report, your thesis, your dissertation, people typically talk about the 5 major sections, okay? Or pieces of content, right? Now, your faculty, your university, your institution, might change that, might add, generally never going to take away from that. But the 5 that you will always have as a minimum is your introduction, a literature review, methodology, results, and then sort of application discussion. Okay, so the first slide here, and I've just got one of these for each of those 5 sections, and then another 6th topic called front and back matter. And you'll see what front and back matter is, sort of goes at the beginning, at the end of your thesis or your writing project. So those are the topics for the introduction. Let's just quickly answer Jeremy's question here. What do examiners focus on when grading or dissertation? Okay, so Jeremy, in the course, I share with you the examiners' reports, the 3 examiners' reports that I received on my PhD. So Jeremy, you will be able to see precisely what they focus on when you go into the course and download those examiners' reports. Now, just a disclaimer, it is an engineering PhD that I did, but it most certainly will give you that examiner's perspective on your writing project and a sense of what they look for. Having said that, you get a range of different types of supervisors, some good, some bad, some terrible. You get a range of examiners. Again, and your supervisors will play an important role in selecting an examiner. So the first point is that the examiner, certainly at a PhD level, is generally, the external is going to be external to your institution and often international, so outside of South Africa. So they will be a leading expert in your thesis. And in actual fact, if you've done a good job of your literature review, you probably will be citing their work. And that's the level that you should be thinking at in terms of doing your research, and the type of people that your supervisors will be looking at to examine it. Having said that, there's also often a long rubric that they use, a checklist that they go through. which we don't have time to go into today, but just to mention that the examiner's reports that I got for my PhD are in my course. And before the end of the webinar today, I'll quickly grab a link written with an article written by an examiner answering exactly that question, which I found very useful in my studies as well. Okay, then Cindy asks, assist with data analysis. I'm using thematic. I thought that I understood it properly, but I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm busy going through my data. Okay, so Cindy, I mean, that's a perfect question for our Facebook group. But if you want to connect with anybody today, then more than welcome to have a look at that. A question that is relevant for today in terms of writing your thesis is, how do I ensure that my data answers my research questions? Okay. So in the application or the discussion section of your thesis, okay, you need to restate your research questions, and then you need to answer them, okay? And that's almost like the beginning and the end. So you're going to put your research questions up front, and you're certainly going to go into them in some detail in a research proposal, but you need to write them again and then answer them in the discussion or the application section of your thesis. As for how well your data answers your research questions, that's going to be a function of the number one, data gathering that you did, and number two, the analysis that you've done in your data. Now, either it's going to be qualitative analysis or quantitative data analysis. And to ensure that you have got the right data, you needed to have taken your research questions, and then if it's qualitative, typically interviews, you're going to convert those research questions into an interview format or a set of interview questions that you'll use when you interview people. Or it'll be questions that you ask analytically or statistically of the data, a data set that you're either going to get, again, through questionnaires, which must be informed by your research questions, or that might be pre-existing. But generally for a PhD level, it should be primary researchers' data that you're going to go out and gather. So your research questions inform the research that you do, and they must guide the interview questions if it's qualitative research and the questions that you're going to ask of the data, because then when you analyze the data, it should be linked back to those questions, having hopefully answered them if you've done your analysis correctly. Daniel Milan says, what would you say is the key to breaking down a large 1,000-hour thesis into small, for example, 1-hour writing sessions? Well, you've answered it, Daniel. I mean, I every morning on the way to work, I used to stop off at a coffee shop and spend half an hour to 45 minutes writing. And I just got into that habit. If you've ever driven through Dunkeld, there's a Four-Nose there, and I basically wrote my PhD in the Four-Nose coffee shop. And it was, as you say correctly, broken down into small writing sessions. 1 hour might be a bit long, half an hour to 45 minutes, because if you're writing well and you're writing consistently, it is going to be tiring and taxing. And the trick is, obviously, Daniel, as I said earlier, is not to leave it till too late, because you simply cannot cram 1,000 hours of writing into a short period of time. It's writing that you've got to be doing all the way through your degree. I've got courses and webinars and lots of coaching on that academic writing process and the discipline of getting writing done on a regular basis. Okay, does the length of your dissertation affect your grade for masters? So, very common question, and there is a video on the YouTube channel where I talk about the length and the number of words in my own PhD and compare those to benchmarks. What I will say, Jeremy, is that typically there is a best practice in terms of the percentages that each section should be. So what percentage in terms of the length or the number of words, your introduction, your literature review, your methodology, your results, and your application, etc., should be. And I think I'll try and dig out my numbers and my percentages as well, or put the link to the video on here. There are some guidelines, and too long is also negative, right? Don't just think that doing a thick, big, long document is guaranteeing your degree. The examiner is going to get very annoyed if there's a lot of waffle in there. And my one tip coaching tip for you today is to use appendices very powerfully, okay? Now, appendices, obviously at the back matter that we'll talk about, but can be extra content that you think is useful, but might not flow with the document, okay? And you want the examiners to be aware of this great content that you've created, but don't put it in if it's going to be a distraction or a frustration for them. Put it in an appendix. It adds to the length and the substance, hopefully, of your document, but it doesn't break the flow that the examiner is going to be going through when they're actually reading your document. Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Ask questions, thesis guru. Well, I don't know about that, but I've certainly been through it myself and got some ideas that hopefully I can pass on to everybody else. Busani, what is the difference between motivation and significance of study on a master's dissertation proposal? Okay, yeah, very important. So the motivation is the problem that you're trying to solve. And you'll link that to the questions that you want to ask, and that goes back to the discussion that we had earlier. So you are motivated to do some research. You must be. I mean, you cannot go into the amount of time and effort it takes to do a research degree if you don't have some motivation to do it. And it can't just be getting a research degree. There must be an element of that is relevant to your life or to your career, etc. So there is some motivation, and it can't just be obviously personal motivation, but you link that to problems that you think need to be solved in the world around us. Okay. And the coaching that I've done with students, I find the most interesting and fascinating problems that people are tracking, and there's motivation for doing the research. The significance is the relevance of solving that problem to the world, okay? Now, in the last few years with COVID, developing a vaccine for that particular strain is obviously incredibly significant for the world. But in 10 years' time, if there is a vaccine and it's been widely rolled out and, we've managed to beat the pandemic and beat the virus, the significance is going to start to reduce again. And there'll be other problems that the world has to tackle. So the significance is about the contribution that you think you'll be able to make to the world today. A lot of that is going to come from your literature review when you find the gap in the literature, where people, in the case of COVID-19, obviously hadn't done drug trials. It was a new virus. There was a gap. People were dying. We needed to get a vaccine. It suddenly becomes incredibly significant, and the motivation is almost self-evident. So that's the slight difference that you just have to think about there as well. Daniel, okay, yeah, Tankel Fornos, you obviously know about that, so it does make great coffee. I was either in the Fornos or the Motherland, just around the corner. Okay, guys, so let's look at the introduction then. So the introduction is like the bridge, if you like. So there's probably 5 people that will read your thesis, okay? Your mom, your supervisor, your external examiners, and maybe 1 or 2 people that's really going to be interested in your topic. And I'm being a bit facetious here. But one of my other courses really encourages postgraduate researchers to write articles and papers. And that's where you're going to document the contribution that you make. Your thesis is not actually the contribution. It's the work that justifies the contribution that you can make. If you still want to make a contribution, then you must write those articles. You must put documentation out into the world and into the industry that is extracted from your thesis, that answers, questions. If there's a special edition for a certain journal or a conference that's dealing with a certain topic, they'll be calling for papers, and you've got some research and some data and some analysis and some findings that you want to make a contribution to. But the introduction is the bridge into that world. Okay, so you need people to cross the bridge from the world that they live in today to the world of your research work that you've been doing. And your background must do that. So the way you do that is give some definitions. You will probably have some jargon and some specific terms. And if you need to explain those and make it easy for people to understand key concepts, then you must list those in there. Problem statement, again, in your research proposal for your institution to justify your topic. So Aniki, let's just bring this in here now. In your faculty and in your desire to do a research degree, you, I think, would have had some idea of a topic in your mind. Okay. The process of going through a research proposal answers the question that you're asking there of the institution support for you and their approval of you to go ahead and do the research. And what will happen is that you'll typically come with an idea, something that you're passionate about. And working with your supervisors and developing a proper research proposal, you'll convert that topic into a thesis statement. So there's a vast difference between a topic of, let's say, COVID-19 vaccine. Okay. That's too big. That's massive. Okay. If you think about it, there's lots of elements to that researchers will need to define with a thesis statement. And in my research proposal course, I teach you exactly how to do that. But your research proposal will get to the point where there's a thesis statement that is a suitable size and scope, if you like, for you to accomplish in a master's or a PhD, and which you can then apply some research questions and a research methodology to. A topic is just the name of an area that you're doing the research in. And really what you want to get to a point is that there's enough interest by your university or institution in your topic that you then mutually develop this research proposal with input from your supervisors and the library and other people in the environment, that you then co-create this research proposal. Obviously, you're going to be doing the bulk of the work in it, but that they then approve, and which defines the research that you're going to do. But Aniki, your topic really is for you to drive. I mean, I think that's the key message is if you're passionate about something, then no one should really stand in your way. What you do just need to do is make sure that you follow the academic principles to get your research done, because it's only through the academic institution, and I'm not talking about an institution like Wits or Pretoria, the institution of creating knowledge is the academic world that we live in, right? And the process of creating research and contributing to knowledge is everything that is housed in that world, okay? And your research is going to have a greater amount of credibility and ultimately longer-term contribution if you follow that process, if you understand the conventions and the ways of doing it. And yes, there are sometimes disagreements, and sometimes people, get a research proposal and the university doesn't like it, and they go to another university and the university does like it. So, it's on a case-by-case basis. But if you go through the academic process and you're passionate enough about something that you're willing to make the changes to keep the process going, then I firmly believe that most universities will let you be very exploratory and creative in the research that you want to do. Okay, let's pick up a couple of those questions just now. And then just the question about finding the courses. Iwana, if you hop onto that website, www.studentsuccess.coach, you can find me there. And I'm also just going to pop a quick link in here for you to jump onto as well. And that's where you can see all of my courses. Okay, and there's about 7 or 8 specifically related to sort of academics and university students, but there's, as you'll see, lots of business courses there as well. And any of my courses that you do, first of all, if you'd like free access to them, just pop me a note and I'll open it up for you. And also, please give me a rating and a review on the course. Absolutely critical for ongoing success and sustainability of the contribution that I make to all of you guys. Jeremy says, I feel like my dissertation for my engineering master's has potential flaws in terms of analyzing experimental data and results. What checks can you perform for feasibility and correct analysis? Sure. Jeremy, I think, again, that's a question to bring into the Facebook group, and you probably want somebody in that field and doing a similar type of analysis to help you. But what you're doing is very good. You're being self-critical, and far better to uncover those flaws and deal with them in your research rather than for an examiner to identify them in the report. Now, linking this question back to today's topic of writing a thesis, in the final section of your thesis, you're going to have a subsection called limitations. Now, Jeremy, what you might find is that, And yes, of course, double check your methodology, double check your calculations, double check everything you've done. But if everything checks out, those flaws might just turn out to be limitations of your research, and that you weren't able to achieve what you had hoped for, or that it turned out slightly different to what you hypothesized. Because remember, you have a thesis statement, you'll also have a hypothesis of how you think that research is going to turn out. Now, what you think are flaws might just be a deviation from what you hypothesized was going to be the result. Now, true research always reflects the results of it and records the limitations that you experienced, and the difference between what you hypothesized the result would be and what the actual results would be. And true, authentic research and good researchers don't, false text their research, i.e. try and twist the data to fit their hypothesis. Okay, and a lot of researchers are often criticized for that. You have to true results of your analysis. What you can do is check your methodology and check your process to get there. So limitations and the link between the hypothesis and the results that you're getting, that could actually be what's happening in your results. But in terms of your process and your calculations, I would get somebody in engineering to check that. Jeremy, I don't know which university you're at, but yeah, great question, and a good question for the group, a good question for your supervisors. As I say, we've got 3,000 people in the group, and I'm certain that there is somebody there that can help you. Okay, Len, but last question before we move on. If one's PhD produces a product, you use software as commercial value, who owns the IP to that product? Sure. Wow, that's a great question. I would, yeah, sure. I don't know if anybody else has got an answer to that. I don't want to say, and then you might, if there is a likelihood that your research is going to produce a commercially viable piece of software, you might want to state that you claim ownership at the beginning, because, and I'll tell you why, if the university has made a contribution to developing that software, and it's difficult for you to claim that they didn't, okay, because you'll have discussed this with your supervisors, you'll have discussed this with your colleagues in the environment of that institution, right? Now, I know as an employee at FNB, any IP I create is owned by the bank. Okay, I'm an employee. Okay, if I was to build a product, I can't claim ownership because I'm employed and there's a contract clause in there. Now, as a student studying, you would need to just check the fine print, and you'd need to create a specific exclusion as early on as possible to ensure that you don't get into that type of a situation. And we've all seen in the press, for example, at Vodacom, there's been a big case around IP, etc. So very good question, Mtunzi. And it sounds to me like you're in electrical engineering or comp science, etc. And it's very common for a PhD to produce software because the problems that you solve are then encoded in that software and creates new algorithms for people to get access to through that software. If you look at machine learning or artificial intelligence or anything like that, it's very common a challenge that you've got there. And what I'm seeing is that you want to then commercialize that and obviously profit from that for future career. Pleasure, Jeremy. I hope it's useful. That's great feedback. Thank you very much. Yeah, Olga, thanks for your input there. It depends on the university-owned contract they set up. Yeah, and that's a great point. I think there is a percentage that's going to be applicable because, as I said earlier, very difficult to justify that you didn't benefit in some way from being in the institution, right? You've had access to their experts, their library, their research, everything. You very rarely are able to create something of value in isolation. But what you can do is create contractual conditions to allow you to claim ownership should that situation arise up front. In fact, it's one of the biggest problems that entrepreneurs face once they commercialize something and it becomes incredibly profitable. Everybody then wants to get a piece of it and claim ownership. So these are things that you absolutely need to get right. Okay, let's finish introduction. I want to move on. Also, into introduction, your research questions, we've spoken about that. Motivation, we've spoken about that. Hypothesis, I mentioned that as well. Limitations, assumptions, chapter overviews as well. Now, those are limitations that going into your research, you anticipate. the limitations section at the end will also include limitations that you experienced during your research, and must again link back to the limitations that you knew of when you were going into the research in the very beginning. All right, literature review. Okay, and I mean, I could do an entire webinar and an entire course on literature reviews, and we've done webinars on literature reviews, but what you really need to do is to set up the lines of inquiry. So as you develop your topic and you go through the research proposal, you'll have areas, if you like. And in my whiteboard lesson, I sort of draw circles, and these are your lines of inquiry, the different angles that you come at your research from. And you really need to structure your literature review, on that basis. And you'll see in my PhD, my lines of inquiry, and it worked for me. And then what happens is, those lines of inquiry, as you narrow down using your topic and your thesis statement, they start to overlap, and then you can understand and identify the gaps in the literature. And then that's what must start coming out in your literature review, because your literature review must set up the scene, obviously, for all the research that you've done on the existing work, but then position and justify the work that you're going to do in your research. Now, the second bullet point there is very important. In your research proposal, you will also have done an initial literature review. But the literature review in your thesis, while you can reuse a lot of what you've done in the literature review for your research proposal, obviously not copy-paste. It must be an evolved, improved literature review. The most important thing that, again, the examiners are going to be looking for, so just coming back to the original question about the examiners, is they're looking for an academically confident voice in your writing. Now, by the time you finished a PhD on a topic, you arguably should have been now that expert, okay? Because you've done the research, right? You've done the primary research, you've uncovered the major issues. You must be positioning yourself as an expert, and you must speak or write academically with the confidence of being an expert. And it's very interesting, if I go read my literature review section of my research proposal and the literature review in my PhD, I can quickly see that academic confidence. Just because I've been grappling with those topics, I've been going back to that work, I've been testing my results and my findings against that work, and I've become immersed in that world, and my academic voice has become a lot more confident. So that's a very important thing just to think about. Okay, then of course the important works, highlighting the gaps. You need to have read widely. You need to have followed through the trail of reading one work, and then the references of that work, and then the references of those works. And it's a paper trail through the academic system of how we manage and maintain the world's knowledge. I spoke about the overlapping topics, and then referencing. So you can have lots of citations to those works. Obviously, very important that you use the referencing techniques that are required for your faculty. There's webinars and courses that I've got available on referencing with EndNote that talks about those different conventions. Make sure that you get that right. You should have a style guide, but if you're using something like EndNote, then you can just tick the correct referencing convention from the drop down, and you've created that plugin from something like EndNote where you're managing all your sources into Microsoft Word. Then it's a simple thing of citing as you write, and I've got webinars and techniques to help you do that as efficiently as possible. Okay, Olga's got a very good question here now. If we're continuing on our topic of honors but have not published the work, are we allowed to use this information again, or should it be reworded and referenced? Okay, so I can certainly talk about master's to PhD. An honors, I'm not 100% certain, but let me explain how it works, right? So when you must see research as a continuum, okay? And from honors to master's to PhD, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. What Olga's talking about here is the results and the findings that you generate at the different stages of it, okay? So, and you've heard, I think, probably recently there was somebody who did their PhD in a year or something ridiculous. I can't remember what it was. So again, it's not about length or duration or time in your life or whatever. It's about the quality and the nature of the research that you do. So what Olga's talking about is that often somebody might go into a master's And they realize as they're doing their masters that there's actually so much more in there that they want to do, that it becomes the size and scope of a PhD. Okay. And in rare circumstances, you could then take the work that you've done for a master's. You could either finish it and produce that report and publish those findings on that master's, or you could say, I'm going to continue the research and then aim to get your PhD. What you cannot do, unfortunately, is get both the master's and the PhD using that same set of results. You have to, like Olga said, to declare, I've done my master's, and then you can use that master's as a groundwork or a foundation to go on to your PhD, which is then another set of data, another set of results, another set of findings, but which can build on the master's level findings and research that you've done. So so for masters and PhD, if I was to answer Olga's question, yes, you could use that research and those findings, but only if it hadn't already been examined and submitted as a master's level degree. Okay, very important. So that's the important thing to think about. And again, your supervisors and your institution can give you some guidance there. Okay, I love this question to Fadzwa. In layman's terms language, what is a literature review? What is it about? I failed to grasp the concept of literature. Okay. In layman's terms, other people have already done what you want to do. Okay, it's a fact. But they may not have done it in the specific area that you might find you want to go into more detail. Okay, are you with me so far? And you need to uncover those gaps by doing a literature review, if that makes sense. And your literature review helps you describe the academic gap in the work that other people have done. Okay, a terrible thing to do is to do a PhD, produce a findings and a set of results, and then find that somebody else has already followed that exact same methodology on a similar data set and produced findings that are equivalent in nature and contribution to yours. And you've then potentially wasted 4 years. Okay. So that is what a literature review is, number one. Number two is to demonstrate your grasp of the existing work that's already done there. Einstein had a great quote. He says, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Okay, so Einstein, obviously great scientist, but he always credited other researchers. And that's also a fundamental idea of a literature review, is to find out what other people have done so that you can extend their work. And every research paper, bringing that question again back to this topic of thesis writing, at the end, there's going to be a section on future work. So you will make recommendations on what future work could look like that builds on yours. And again, back to Olga's question, that future work could be the skeleton of a PhD level work. And that future work highlights gaps. Okay, so as you do a literature review, be reading other people's theses, reading other articles, reading other conference proceedings. And in those documents and in that research, people will be saying, I've done this, but I think we also need to do this. And I think somebody needs to look at this and this and this and this. And you go in and you look at all of that and you say, okay, I can do that. I can do this. I see the gap there. There's an overlap with this other gap over here. And then you're defining that thesis statement that gives you the direction that you want to take in your study. Okay. KR, consultation with a statistician, does it only apply to quantitative research? So, yeah, largely speaking, you'll have far more statistics or data analysis in a quantitative study than you would in a qualitative research. But again, there is going to be some analysis of data in a qualitative study. The qualitative nature of it is simply the fact that it is an unstructured process of gathering data from an unstructured source of data as a human being, right? A human being is unstructured. We're not a database. We're not a system in that sense of the words. So it can also apply to qualitative, but in most cases, it will apply to quantitative. All right, let's move on quickly. Methodology. Okay, and you'll see this in my PhD. You may have a preference for a methodology. You might say, I want to do a case study. I want to do grounded theory. I want to do qualitative. I want to do quantitative, like the discussion that we had just now. That's fantastic. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you write up your methodology section, you can't just start by saying this case study methodology. Okay, you have to step back, and there's a fantastic model, the onion model, that I used in my PhD research, and you go look at it and learn more about it. And I also teach it to you in the course, where you step back, and this is what you must do as a researcher. You step back and you say, well, why do I want to do case study? Why do I want to do grounded theory? What is my philosophy for how I think the world creates knowledge? And again, you look at the philosophers, and it's philosophical because it comes from philosophy. So people like Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Or other people said, or you look at Ayn Rand's writings of pure objectivism. I have to have the formula, the equation. Everything has to work on fundamental principles, okay? And that's the range of philosophical thinking. And as you break down that range of philosophical thinking about how we create and understand the world around us, then you start getting into the different types of methodologies. And the onion method that I show in my research opened up my mind, because I then understood how I must position myself for the examiner. And this is all about the examiner, right? Now, the examiner is going to, again, coming back to the earlier question, they're going to take marks off if you just dive into case study. Why did you choose case study? What is your philosophy? What is your mindset? What is your thinking? Why do you think case study in this specific instance? So you've got to take a few steps back before you dive into the detailed methodological steps that you've chosen. Okay, and I talk about the onion model there, describe why you chose your methodology, and then you go into the steps that you use, the practicalities. And again, you will link your literature review in here as well. From your literature review, you'll have a good sense of people who've done this type of work, the methodologies that they used, and you could also cite people who do research on certain types of methodologies and why those are more applicable to your specific topic. So you're continuing to cite and to reference people even in your methodology section. Then ethical considerations. If you're doing qualitative research, you're interviewing people for your research, then you'll typically have an ethics policy at your university, and you must include that probably in the methodology section. And what I did was I then had a few appendices where I showed the ethics approval. And then if you need ethics approval, you'll have to submit your sort of questionnaire and the sort of consent form and the information about how you applied for that ethics process. And you can stick those in as appendices and then again reference them in your methodology section. Okay, results. Now, frameworks or scaffolding or ways in which you see the world or other researchers have seen the world and tried to understand the world create consistency. Okay, so if you have a well-articulated framework and one that you've either borrowed or one that you are going to be creating in your research, make sure that you're consistent in how you use it and how you use it to describe what it is that you're trying to do in your research. So constantly orientate the reader back to whatever framework it is that you're using. And this section now is, so your introduction and your methodology will you've already done some work on that in your research proposal. And there's a lot that you could reuse for that in your final report. And when I said that I started my final report in the week that I did my research proposal, that's exactly what I did. I took my introduction and my literature review, and I put those into a final report document. Now, obviously, I was going to go back to my introduction and my literature review and continually improve and update those, but it was a good place to start. Okay, your results section is going to be brand new because that's the results that you're going to get from the work that you do. So Jeremy, a framework, people have different frameworks for understanding different things, right? And sometimes you can visualize those frameworks and sometimes you can't visualize those frameworks. So a simplistic example is, concentric rings of the onion model that I've spoken about just now, which go from a philosophical worldview all the way down to methodological techniques that you use in research. You can have a 4-box model, you can have an 8-box grid, you can have a ladder. There's different ways of visualizing different frameworks. You could argue that scientific equations and mathematical principles and medical understanding, those are all frameworks that it's established knowledge. A framework is a way of helping other people understand established knowledge so that you can add to that framework, or you can find gaps in it and improve those frameworks. Okay. Then just a couple of points about, if you go the quantitative or the qualitative in your results section, and this is just like a rule of thumb. A qualitative study is going to have a little bit more text and narrative. And when you read through it, because it's much more of a human-centered, qualitative, subjective type of study, it's going to be a lot more narrative and descriptive and text, and even, in some cases, pictures potentially if you're doing visual narratives, etc. Whereas a quantitative study with lots of stats and tables of data, it's going to have numbers, okay? And tables and graphs, and it's going to feel like a statistical or quantitative study. So just depending on which of the two that you're doing, and again, you could have a mixed methods or a case study that blends qualitative and quantitative. That's not a hard and fast rule. But I know, for example, I used a qualitative method called grounded theory, which has a little bit of data analysis in it. But when you read my PhD final report in the course, and you browse through the results there, you'll see, lots of quotations from interviews, lots of discussion about the results that I found, lots of comparison between the various different findings, etc. And then very importantly, inductive or deductive results, you need to be very clear about what you're working towards in your thesis. And again, this is something that you set up in your research proposal. Are you developing a new theory because there's a gap in existing theories or in existing research? Or are you testing a theory because you think it's wrong or it might be flawed? So go back to the question that we had earlier in terms of flaws. Has other research been done where you think to yourself, hey, there's a flaw in that theory? I'm not so certain that's correct. And this is how we develop and decide on established research, is because people put research out there, people read their stuff, and then they challenge it and they do other research to test it. And that's why we have established principles, because the results then become comparable. If people researched in different ways, you can't compare results. So you can test an existing theory as long as you follow a rigorous academic process, and then set up a conflicting view of two theories. And that's something that you'll find if you do a proper literature review, other researchers that disagreed on a theory or a framework. And then either you're going to create a framework that helps them agree or proves or disproves one of those theories. And that's where you get this idea of inductive or a deductive research. A sort of method or system of expressing information, it could absolutely be that. It's a convention. It's an established or agreed way of understanding or viewing or learning more about the world around us. It's a scaffolding. I like to think of it as a scaffolding. It's not necessarily the building itself, but within the scaffolding helps you, create the structure of what it is that you want to talk about. Can we use a combination of inductive and deductive, for instance, identifying gaps and challenging theories? Yes, you can. Olga, you can combine a case study with a qualitative and a quantitative method. You can take any methodology in the world and combine it with any other methodology in the world that you want to. Just understand the pros and the cons, right? You're potentially creating a new theory or a new methodology by doing that. You have to make sure that you're able to apply that methodology and that you are able to describe it in your final report or your thesis such that anybody else can apply it. And just coming back to that original question about the examiners, because it is such a good question. When you write your methodology, you have to write it in such a way that somebody else can apply it. And it has to get down to those practical levels of document the interviews, ask people to join an interview. How did you get your participants, step by step, right? So Olga, if you're describing a methodology that combines existing methodologies that are already well documented, that's fine, as long as you can create it well, you can describe it well enough for somebody else to follow it, and for somebody to examine the results that you found as a result of that methodology. The more complex you make it, the harder you're making all of those things. Sometimes it's better just to stick to the established methodologies and either inductive or deductive, because once you combine things and you do mixed methods, you're just creating complexity for yourself, and you're opening the door for people to challenge your research and for an examiner to either be confused or find gaps, in your work. The newness of your research and the contribution must come from the gap that you've identified, or the lack of any type of research that's been done in that area. I wouldn't suggest that you should be innovative and creative in the application of a methodology. You're just now adding something else that you have to manage in your research. So, for example, I did grounded theory. So I followed grounded theory. It's a well-established method. There's lots of textbooks and principles to help you follow grounded theory. The newness and the contribution of my research came from applying an established methodology to a new area that hadn't been researched or hadn't been researched with that particular methodology. Okay. It's very interesting here. KR, I'll be using a deductive approach to planning research on a preconceived idea of proteoherence in antiretroviral therapy treatment. How can I plan my data analysis? Okay, unfortunately, not enough time today. We've just got a few more minutes left, but I would suggest to join us in the Facebook group and ask that question. Recommendation on how to deal with procrastination. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got an entire course on dealing with procrastination. So what I will do is in the Facebook group, I'll create all these links so that you can get it there. Let's quickly finish off discussion conclusion. So the most important is that bullet point there. So again, introduction, literature review, methodology, results. The results is the what, okay? Then you need to go into the discussion or the conclusion. Now, some institutions split those out, or you can combine them in that fifth major piece of content. So sometimes people have 6, right? So now you need to go into so what. So what do the results mean that you found? Okay, and providing they're consistent and you followed the methodology that you wrote in your own methodology section, you must now be able to critically evaluate those results as a researcher. So what? What do those results mean? And like I said earlier, how did they answer the research questions? Okay, so you bring those questions back in again and you answer those research questions, exactly that point there that I indicated. And then you go into now what? And now what goes back to the bridge that you built in the introduction. Now you're going back over the bridge into the real world and you're saying, so what does this mean to the world? So what is these results and these findings? How can I apply those? What is the other work that can be done? What is the implication on the industry as a result of these findings? And again, as authentic researchers, you document the limitations that you came up with, and your future work, or the now what, the going out back into the real world with this research. You describe, and you'll see in my PhD, I describe implications for people that are impacted by those results, and then future work which can build on that research, which other people can come and do as a gap that you uncovered, and helps people to fast track and find gaps in the literature reviews that they will be doing for their own research. Okay, then lastly, front matter is all the stuff at the beginning before you get to introduction. So literally everything up to introduction, title, declaration, abstract, dedication, acknowledgements, all those things that I've listed there. And again, you should have a style guide from your institution. So make sure that you're following the style guide. But what I've listed there, it's golden, okay? You do those things. They must be there. Back matter, references, okay? So remember, you're going to be citing as you write, and if you've got the tool set up, it will automatically add any reference that you've cited anywhere in your document. It'll add to the list of references. So you must have a list of references at the end, and then you must have, as I said, appendices. And I think I got up to Appendix Q in my research. I had a lot of appendices, okay? And appendices are very powerful because, again, they don't frustrate the examiner reading the document, but you can refer to them and people will go and look at them and get the additional value or the additional work that you've created as part of the research. And in actual fact, when you get examined on a PhD, you'll get one of three results: either an outright fail, and this work is irrecoverable and it's so badly flawed that you cannot even go back and fix it up. Okay, and that's obviously not good news. Or you'll get changes required to achieve a pass, which the examiner wants to see, right? Okay, so they want to re-examine the document. And the first one, they're not prepared to even re-examine it. It's so badly flawed. It's unfortunately the worst case scenario. Okay. Or you'll get, in the third case, changes that the external examiners are happy for your supervisors to check. Okay. And that's what happened in my PhD, right? And one of the changes that the examiners suggested was to actually bring some of my content in my appendices back into the main body of the report. And that was very interesting for me. And you'll see that in my external examiners reports in the courses, was to think about that balance of what is actually materially relevant to the main body of the report, or is supplemental and additional but useful for somebody to read, and is important to keep in one place. Because in a year or two or three, when you're trying to get articles published and do conference presentations, etc., and your files are all over the place. I mean, I once saw a PhD where one of the appendices, back to the question of the software, one of the appendices actually contained the software, the programming lines of code of the software that was developed in the PhD. So use appendices extensively to keep all that data in one place. Because if you come back to it in 10 years, or somebody else phones you up and says, hey, I saw your presentation, or I saw your report, if you've got to go and scramble and find all the data, very good to keep that as far as possible in your appendices. Okay, so sorry, we've run out of time now, but I'm going to just, where is this link here now? Okay, so here is the link to the course, free access. There's the link. Click on that link, and that'll course landing page, and it should say free, and you can enroll in there. And okay, we've run out of time now, but I was hoping to show you just a couple of the lessons that you get in there. But it's very easy, just go through it. And in the resources tabs, you'll get the examiner's report, you'll get my PhD report. I think I even put my research proposal document in there, I can't remember. But the course literally goes, like I've taught you in this afternoon's webinar, section by section by section, and gives you a lot more detail on that today. Okay, Londeka, it seems like you need to come to one of our procrastination webinars. So I'm going to share that for you, because I sense that you really need some support and some assistance there. And like Tracy said, everybody struggles from procrastination, but there are some very specific techniques that I teach about procrastination that I think will be able to help you. And then what I really would like you to remember is, of course, our laptop giveaway, which you can see there in our Facebook groups. On the left was the new post for the laptop giveaway, and we're going to be announcing that next Friday, the 20th. So Tracy will join me in the webinar. She'll have been looking at the top three most reactions to the comments on that post there, where you can see we've already got 46 comments. So 46 motivations for people to get that laptop. And Tracy will look at the top three reacted comments and make a decision and announce that. And there on the right-hand side, as you can see, two of our winners from last time with their laptops. The donor wanted just a picture of them with their laptops, which is totally understandable. And they were so thrilled to get their new laptops. In actual fact, they also got printers. So all that equipment there that you can see was part of that competition. Look, we had a lot more money given to us by the donor then, so we were able to do a lot more for them. But I think we gave speakers, printers, laptops, memory drives, you name it. And that's part of the benefit of this community, is that we have people that want to help, right? And it's a fantastic platform to help people. Jeremy, no, I just set the platform up. I can make a contribution and I can teach you from what I've learned. But people like Tracy and many others who are very active in the community, and our donors often who want to stay anonymous, they are the real heroes because they embrace the community and they're willing to make a contribution into it and support you all to be successful. Okay, now, next week, very excitingly, and Tracy, I'd like you just to comment in the chat because you know Jean Berger, and a massive certification in the world of finance is called the CFA, Chartered Financial Analysis. Now, if any of you on the call today are doing a B-commerce or doing accounting or in a financial world, you may want to consider doing a CFA. And getting that CFA just opens incredible doors for you in investment banking, in fund managers, asset managers, stuff that I do not understand, okay, way beyond my intellectual abilities, but who guys like Jean Berger have been teaching thousands of people for many, many years, okay, and teachers at JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, RMB, you name it, all these guys where there is investment and funds and very clever people doing very incredible work. So CFA is this exam that you go through, and we are creating a brand new community and a brand new set of courses. I'm working with Jean Berger to do that, and we're going to be launching that in the webinar next week, so 12 o'clock next week. So I'll have Jean in the interview talking about his experience and talking about the courses and the community we're creating around CFA. And if that is something that you are interested in doing, please join us next week. And in next week's webinar, we'll also be announcing the winner of the laptop. So if you have commented on that post or you have any interest in that laptop giveaway, we'll be doing both in next week's webinar. So join us then for CFA. And what I would also like to do very quickly is just to give you the CFA group. And it's actually a very cool Facebook group that we've set up. So I'm going to pop that in the chat there and also just share it. So facebook.com/groups/CFA secrets. Okay. And Jean Berger really believes he's got the secrets for helping you pass the CFA. It's a massive exam. It's very hard. The pass rates are like 10% or something ridiculous. But Jean Berger has developed a very unique set of material and content and lessons, and we'll be talking about that. And of course, the community is there also where you can ask questions, get his hot tips and tricks. He posts in there a few times a week. We've got another CFA expert supporting us in that group. So please do pop in there. And even if you're just, curious, and even if you just want to get an idea about CFA and find out a little bit more about this world of finance, and evaluate it as a potential career for yourself, that's exactly what we're setting it up to help you achieve. It's a safe space that at a very low cost, no cost, in fact, you can come into the community, ask a few questions. We're there, we're set up, we've got a team in place. You can even do a couple of the courses. Obviously, when you go and do the CFA, you're going to have to pay for that exam. But if you've got the support in the community and the training from somebody like Jean Berger, then there's just a high possibility that you're going to do that exam and be successful and get the certification. And there's a CFA level 1, 2, and 3. And that really, if you have a financial, aspiration or already doing a finance degree, that can rocket, your career massively if you want to get into investment banking or finance or that sort of area. So join us next week. And as Tracy said, Jean really knows his stuff, and CFA is often a tool for people from a non-finance background. That's very true, Tracy. So thank you for that. Thank you for pointing that out. You can go into a CFA even if you've got an engineering degree, or even if you're a doctor or dentist, or you want to get into that, go do a CFA. That's absolutely very true, Tracy. Thank you for pointing that out. And I think what John gives you is the tips and tricks, to getting through your CFA, and the things that he's seen work for the thousands of students that he's helped to get that certification. So that is next week. Right. Then the last thing just to mention before we say goodbye and all go on our weekends is, as I promised at the beginning, cloud technology is a massively important technology in a digital transformation. And we have launched a brand new course, and it's actually quite short and quick for you to go into and learn about the cloud. So I've shared the link, free access into that course. And Guy by the name of Brendan is your lead instructor in that course. And I've shared a little bit of insights from the course on the screen there so that you can learn about the cloud. And this is really good at this level for non-technical people to get an understanding of cloud. We're going to be building out more courses that also help you with certification on Google Cloud, more specifically, and AWS and other cloud technologies. But this is really the first sort of introductory course that gives you some insights into the cloud. And as I said earlier, any workplace that you're going into, I can almost guarantee you they are talking about digital transformation. They're talking about the cloud. If you want to start a business, you're going to be using the cloud. And the world is moving towards, outsourced subscription usage-based models for the consumption of technical solutions and storage and applications, all of which are going to be in the cloud and made available to you as an entrepreneur or as a business, and which you then make available to your customers and to your employees. And as you'll see there on the slide, digital and digital transformation is having a massive impact on customers and customers' expectations for the way they work and the way they consume the products and services that they need in their lives. So cloud, digital transformation, what is the cloud? What is the difference between cloud and on-premise, and all of these great things we cover in this course. So please do take up this course as a bonus from today. It's free access, and believe me, if you're able to go into a workplace and you're able to use some of the language that we introduce you to in this course, it's only going to be beneficial to you. We've done digital transformation webinars previously. Sometimes I get invited to do them in specific faculties, but what you'll get in this course is a good introductory level overview of cloud as an important technology. Jeremy, yes, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn. And just on that point, at the end of all my courses, all of the Udemy courses, you'll be able to get a certificate, and then it gives you a feature to post your certificate on social media. And if you choose to post it on LinkedIn, I'd love it if you can add hashtag Peter Alkema, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. We can connect, and then you just @ me in your post. And then when I see that, I'll share that, congratulate you, and then your network and my network sees the fact that you've got that certificate, you've been through that training, and it's going to add to your credentials. It's going to add to your employability, because remember, one of the things that we talk about a lot in these webinars is employability, workplace readiness, and employers are looking for extra courses, extra training, learning about the cloud, learning about what's happening in the world around you. A lot of my courses provide that. And if you want the social proof of being able to share that certificate, then look me up on LinkedIn. I'll share it, and you'll get that credibility in your network and in my network as well. So the very last thing for me to say is, as always, do take action. It's the one thing that's going to differentiate you from other people. It's the one thing that's going to give you success. And it's the one thing that you obviously need to overcome procrastination in order to take action. But the principles that I teach around burning your boats is to link your action to emotions, right? You will take more action the more emotional that you feel about doing something, as opposed to the intellectual logic, which doesn't help you when there are distractions like Netflix and Facebook and other more exciting things to do, which will hold you back and distract you and consume valuable time that you need to put into your studies and your degrees and your work, etc. Okay, so wow, that's a long session for today. Thank you so many of you for staying. Hopefully it was useful. All the detail, all the worksheets, all my PhD information I've packaged into that course that I shared with you. Just please leave a rating and a review. Obolokile, it's an absolute pleasure. I enjoy doing these sessions. I've talked now for an hour and 15 minutes, so I'm exhausted. I hope it's been useful for you all, and I wish you all the very best. You guys are the ones doing the hard work on your degrees. Join us in the Facebook group. Subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Take advantage of all the resources that we give you. Pop onto my website. Ask for help in the Facebook group. These are all things that I wish I'd had when I was going through my studies. And what I've set up and what I've designed and what the people like Tracy and many others contribute to is what I wish I'd had, and what a lot of students say they wish they had more access to. So spread the word, make sure that people get the support and the help that they need to be successful. So Jeremy, I'm glad I met your expectations, that you got what you needed from this, and that at least you feel more confident about doing your thesis. But go through my lessons and make sure that you get the input from your faculty about what they expect from a style and an output and a structure and a content perspective. But what you get in the course and what I've gone over in the webinar today really, 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 I think gives you at least 60-70% of what you need to know. And like Jeremy has said, gives you the confidence to get cracking with the work that you need to do. Okay, Jackie and everybody, absolute pleasure. Have a super weekend, and good luck with all the writing. Cheers.